everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's a wonderful snowy day up here in Summit County, Colorado, and I hope everybody's doing well today. While I'm doing the presentation, I'm going to put everybody on mute, and when we're finished, I will open it up for questions. So today we're going to talk about Part 2 of end-of-year procedures. This is usually the time of year people start thinking about doing physical inventory counts and seeing making sure that what they have in Keystroke is what they actually have in their store. I'd like to welcome you just in general to Keystroke Live. We do this every Thursday, 9 o'clock Mountain Time. Same time, same place, same login information. And the first Thursday of every month is with our president, Michael Gebb. Today we're going to be talking about Variance. Variance is a submodule of the database manager, and it allows you to adjust the quantity on hand for your inventory items. It can be due to, just a regular physical inventory count, which a lot of businesses look at doing towards the end of the year, counting everything in your store. It could also be related to items that you might have lost due to theft or breakage or spoilage. It could also be used for purchasing, but since Keystroke has such a great purchasing module, it's really not recommended. But you could add to your quantity on hand using a variance. It also gives a paper trail or a record of what you've done and what you've counted and that sort of thing. And you can do reports of your variances, and you can also link your variance or the difference in the value of your inventory to your accounting package if you have our accounting link. There are a lot of parameters in the variance module, and once I go through this, we'll take a look at those. You can choose to include the allocated or layaway quantities on your variance, and that kind of depends on how you run your business. If you have a sales order or layaway and you actually take those items off the shelves, put them in a special place in your back room where you're not going to count them, then you're not going to include those in your variance. But if you are going to count them, those items that are on a sales order or a layaway, if they're still out in your store, you do want to include this. You can also choose to use the last cost or the average cost for valuing the change in your quantity or the overall value of your inventory. There's a parameter to merge same items as well. This is great, especially if you've got the same item in various parts of the store and you're going around with data collectors, or you're actually having people with pen and paper counting items in certain areas. It makes it easier to merge these items onto your variance. There's a great autofill function, which is wonderful if you're counting your entire store. It will put everything that you have in Keystroke, or you can filter it onto the variance, and it takes a snapshot of what Keystroke says you have at the time you do the autofill. As you're doing your variance and adding items and adding counts, you can save it as you go along, just in case power goes off, something like that. Save it as you go along. When you're finished with it and you want to finally update your quantities, you post it. And there are some messages that we're going to talk about when you do post. If you have not put a physical quantity on an item, but it is on the variance, you'll have choices of what to do. So we're going to take a look now at Keystroke. And as I said, the Variance module is part of Database Manager. And we can go to Variance here. When you first get into Variance, it asks you to give a session ID number. Generally, it's going to default to whatever register number you're using on the particular computer you're doing the variance on. You want to be very careful. You probably don't want session ID number 1 open on more than one computer. That can cause an issue because what gets updated at one computer may not get updated on the other, and you're really not going to get a full variance. So you really only want one session number per computer. If you want, you could have, say, register 2 for departments A, B, and C, and register 3 for departments, you know, X, Y, and Z. That's fine, but you never want to have the same variance open on more than one computer because you will not get what you actually want, because whichever one saves last is the one that's going to be good. And there's no way to merge things across 2 different registers of the same session ID. Let's take a look at the parameters that we have. You can choose what your entry field is. Most businesses use product code, but you can use any of our index fields. That is going to be how you enter items on your variance. Here's the parameters I spoke about to include your quantity allocated and your quantity layaway in your quantity on hand when you put it here and on the variance screen. It's important if those items on sales orders or layaways are actually in your store on the shelf and you're going to count them, then you're going to want to put X's here. If they're put away in a special place in the back room on a set of shelves and you're not going to count them, then you will uncheck these parameters. This is also where you can include to use last cost rather than your average cost. Average cost is generally what most people use. When you're entering items, you can default the physical quantity to 1. This is good if you have, say, a wireless scanner that's directly connected to this computer and you're just going around and scanning items at the store. Every time you scan something, it's going to add a 1 to whatever this item is. So if you have a wireless scanner, not a data collector, but a wireless scanner directly connected to the terminal you're doing the variance on, you can default the physical quantity 1. The confirm physical quantity is great. If you're manually entering items, you're going to put in a green widget. Confirm physical quantity means it's going to automatically go to the physical quantity field for you. You could do the same thing for confirm variance quantity if you're just going to say add 2 more to what's already there. That's a little less common, but it is available. Keystroke can also take a look at serial numbers, and if you put in a physical quantity that's different than what Keystroke thinks you have, it can ask you, okay, you say we have 8, but I have 10 serial numbers. Which serial numbers are the good ones? If you don't do serialized items, you don't have to worry about it, or you can just ignore it by putting a check here and disable the serial numbers. You can also choose whether or not you want to post items with a 0 variance, which the variance is the difference between what Keystroke says you have and what you've actually counted. Those with the 0 variance means they're the same. Keystroke says you have 10, you've counted 10. There are advantages to posting 0 variance items because at least you have a record that says you have counted this item and there was no variance or no difference between what Keystroke said you have and what you counted. If this is unchecked, Keystroke will ignore those items with the 0 variance, will not save the fact that you counted those items. This is your merge same items parameter. You have all kinds of choices here. If you're doing data collectors, you probably want, and you're going to be importing several files from several data collectors, you might want to choose something like no message, no beep. It's automatically going to merge the lines. So you have a data collector that says it counted 3 over here, another data collector gets imported and they counted 5. It's going to automatically merge those with no user intervention. And like a lot of our, like the purchase manager and the sales manager, there is a detail box that is available that is editable if you'd like, that shows in the lower corner over here, and we'll get to see this. So these are all our parameters. You can give a name to your variance up in this variance field. For purposes today, I'm just going to show you how to do a full inventory count. But what's great about this, when you want to go back and look at your variances, you can see this little reason or naming that you've done for your variance. So, if you're going to do a full inventory count, you're probably going to want to close the store. The thing that's important when you start a variance, between the time that you do the autofill or add items to the variance and the time you count your items, you don't want any movement of your inventory. Otherwise, it's going to be off. And so you need to take that into consideration. You could do a variance while your store is open, but then you may need to adjust it based on sales during this time. Keystroke help file, I'm not going to show it to you here, but there's a great page on step-by-step instructions for doing a variance. It's a great little reminder. You can print it out. It's a couple of pages. It'll help you plan what you're going to do when you're going to do a full inventory count. I'm going to show you the autofill. It's under the special menu and autofill. Like a lot of our search screens, you're going to see the little word search down here in the lower right-hand corner. If you want to do some sort of filter, for example, you only want to do the book department. Right now, we're going to do book department. I hit F10 here. It autofills. Says it's added 8 line items. These are all my books. That's great if you're only going to do one department at a time, but in this case we're going to do a full inventory, so we want to autofill everything. In this case we're going to have totally blank screen. Generally you're not going to count service and bulk items, so we'll just leave those as 0. We'll hit F10. You notice it added another 100 or so lines, and it skipped the service items. Generally, service items have a quantity of 0, so there's no reason to have them count. You can see here now how it has entered all of my line items that Keystroke says I have. They are in the order of product code. You can change the order by hitting F9 if you want it based on stock number. You can use F9, base it on stock number. You can then resort it if you want to by stock number. You can do this by going to the special menu and sort line items. That will do it based on whatever your entry field is, or just do Shift F2, and now you can see it is resorted by stock number. As I go up, we're in stock number order. So as you come in, we're going to go down to the end here. You can see when you have lot of items, if you're going to autofill and later go back and do your count and enter your physical quantity, it can be really difficult to find the item in the list. If you're manually doing this, the easy way to do it is just be on the last line item and say, okay, now I have a count for my stock number 12. It automatically goes, if I tab over here, and F9, we are on stock number 12, and I counted 147 of these. And then when you hit enter, it goes back to the bottom. Now I'm counting stock number 13. I have 12 of these. You can manually enter this. Other options, you can import from a file. This is under the special menu and import. This is usually from a data collector, something like that. There are 3 possible fields you can import, and it is important that your import file is in a specific order. The first field is your entry field, whether it's product code, stock number, something like that. Your second field is your physical quantity, what you've actually counted. And that's really the only 2 fields in Variance. So we're going to go up to the top. I can start putting in some physical quantities here of items. You know, some of them may be identical, some of them may not. I'm not going to go through and count all of these, but remember, as we go along, you want to save it. If you hit your F10 key, I can just save this variance. And even if I go out of Variance and back in, we've just saved this. Now, I don't have time to do it. I'm going back to Sales Manager, or I have to do something in Purchase Manager. But at a later date, I can go back to Database, Special Menu Variance, or from your navigation menu, you can go to Variance, Special Variance, and you will see it's going to ask you for your session ID. I was on session 1. If I hit OK, now all my items are back. The items I did do a physical quantity on are here. The ones I haven't are not. I can continue doing this. Once you've autofilled and you've done your counts, you can actually open the store back up, and you can spend, you know, a couple of days if you need to, manually putting in your physical quantity, because this takes a snapshot of what this quantity was at the time you did an autofill. Once you've counted, you can go ahead and open your store back up again. When you're finished now putting all of your quantities in here and you hit F10, this is when you want to post it. And this is what happens. It gives you a warning. I have 119 items where my physical quantity is blank. And this is what you can choose to tell Keystroke what to do with these items. You can remove all these items. That's great. If you're only doing a partial count, in this particular case, maybe I'm just going to remove these items from the variance. I didn't count them. You can say set them to 0. This is great when you're doing a full count and you have items that you haven't counted, which means you probably don't have them in the store. In that case, you might want to set them to 0 to say, hey, I did a full count. At this time, we don't have any of these in the store. Or you can leave them blank. Generally, you're not going to do that if you have partial counts like I have here. But the leave blank is great. It gives you actually a way to save and store the value of your inventory without making any quantity changes here in the variance module. In my case, for right now, I'm just going to choose set to 0. I'm not going to count anymore. These are the only items I've counted. Or actually, I'm going to remove them. I only counted some items. If, in fact, I had 0, I could set them to 0. But in this case, let's choose to remove. And it's going to give you a warning. Those are going to be removed. And I'm going to hit OK. Now you can see my variance is blank. So if I get out of Keystroke or out of the variance module, go back in, it's going to be blank. If I need to look at that variance, I can go back to the edit menu, take a look. Here's the one right here, my full inventory count. Obviously, it wasn't a full inventory count. You can see I did a previous one this year just for the month of March. But I can look at it again if I want to, and I can change it if I need to. Now, you can always run reports. If you just need a report rather than actually looking at the screen, you can go to the Reports menu. There are 3 different reports. Displayed variance is just what's on the screen, whether it's you're editing a variance that's already been posted or whether you're just in the middle of one and you want to print something out. You can print your displayed variance. Transactions will take during a date range and say, okay, on this date, I did a variance for all these items. And then on this date, I did a variance for all these other items. The history report kind of does that the opposite. It says, okay, I have this item, and I counted it on this date and this date and this date. So let's take a look at the transactions report. You have various parameters available. You can do it detailed or summary. It's kind of up to you. You can do a filter. You have various forms, or what do you want to see? Do you want to see the cost total? Do you want to see the quantity on hand total? Do you want to see the price total? We're just going to take a look at the cost total, print it to the screen. Now, if I go back to the first of the year and print this to the screen, you can take a look and say, you'll see this is the variance I did on the 17th of February. And if I go down towards the end, here's the one I did today. If I do it the other way, if I do a history report, you can group it if you want to. I'm not going to for these purposes, but you could group by department if you wanted. I'm going to show it by description, and you can choose your form, print it to the screen. I'm going to use the same date range. And now, as this goes through, it's a long report, but as you go down, you can see down below here, this canvas bag. On the 17th of February, I had a variance of 0, but when I counted it today, I had a variance of -1. That means it reduced the quantity. And this shows you the current quantity on hand. Not what it was necessarily at the time of the variance. It's what it says, or it's actually what it had on the variance at the time. So let's go back to, that's kind of it for variance. I'm going to open this back up for questions. Does anybody have any questions on the variance module?
I have a question, Lynn.
Okay.
On when you have matrix items, how do they show up on the variance report?
They will show individually. So if I go back,
will they show that the I don't know if I have the right term, but they will show you the so you can tell the matrix whether it's a large, small, medium, or large, and color.
Correct. Correct. Let's take a look at the variance that we did back in March, where we did a full physical inventory. And I know stock, if I'm down at the end, and I do F9, I know stock number 1 in our sample data, it's going to show your individual items. So if I resort by stock number here, and then go up to the top, you're going to see I have my polo shirt.
Okay.
And it's going to be, that's a size and color, that's a size and color, that's a size and color. But he brings up a good point. You're counting your individual matrix items, but you still have a main matrix that may no longer add up to the quantities of your individual items. There's a special variance that you can do to get that fixed. Once you've counted your individual items, if you go under the special menu, matrix inventory quantity on hand check. If you do this type of autofill, it's just going to fill your matrix items. This doesn't show your individual item. This is the main matrix item. Now in this case, everything adds up. But if you've counted your matrix items and then the total, grand total on the main matrix record isn't correct, this will fix it and you can post that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great.
One other question.
Sure.
When you do the list, can you sort it by description, group it by department?
When you do, okay, I didn't quite get all of that. Something, okay. Sorting by description and grouping by...
But grouping it by, say, vendor or department or some other method. So you have everything on there, but you have all of them grouped by department rather than just listed, alphabetically or by product number or whatever, stock number.
The only way to do that, Scott, is kind of the way I showed before. You have to autofill it by department. So I do my book department and I autofill.
Okay.
And
all
then
right. So you just have to go through department by department or vendor by vendor, whatever. Okay.
And then I autofill and I'm looking at my food department. And it's going to show it that way. Now, the transaction report, I clicked on the wrong one. Even though your variance isn't organized that way, I'm sorry, your history report, you can group it by department even though it's not that way on the screen.
Okay, okay.
So you can report it grouped by department. You just can't autofill it by department without doing autofill for each department.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Lynn, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. I have a quick question. I have one of my customers who's getting ready to do their variance. They sometimes, or they were worried that they may have items that are, because what they're trying to do is do their counts by aisle. So they'll make a session ID for a particular aisle, and then print out the count sheet and send their employees to go count. But they're worried that they may have the same product on more than one aisle. Maybe something was placed in two different places accidentally. When we're doing the variance, isn't that going to mess up the counts because they're different session IDs?
If they're doing separate variances per aisle, yes, it will. If they're doing a single variance for the whole store and having people count by aisle, then you can merge that same item. But if if they believe that they have the same item in different locations, they're probably going to want to do a single variance so they can merge those same items, because you're right. Otherwise, it's not going to be correct, because they're going to count the green widget in aisle 1 and the green widget in aisle 5. If they're on two separate variances, obviously your count will not be correct for your total.
Would there be a way, if they were to scan the items in, throughout the store, is there a way to print count sheets, just sections of the same variance session at a time, or do they have to print they basically have to print copies of the entire variance every time? So like if they wanted to send their employees just to that one aisle to count those items, but in Keystroke it's the same session ID.
Yeah, that's going to kind of be difficult. I mean, you could print count sheets if you're using the location field, and that's good, but that may not be up to date.
Right.
I mean, you could possibly do it by department, and they could go through it, but then they may find things on the aisle that isn't on their count sheet. So that can get tricky when you do that sort of thing, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out this morning. Remember, it's the same time, same place, except it is Thanksgiving next week. We're not having a webinar, but everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving. The following week will be First Thursday with Michael Gibb. So I hope